The crumpled remains of my walker lay scattered across my driveway, a twisted heap of metal and rubber that looked like the aftermath of a violent storm. The sturdy frame that had been my lifeline for years was now unrecognizable handles bent at grotesque angles, wheels cracked, and plastic shards glinting in the late afternoon sun. I stood frozen on my front porch, clutching the railing to keep myself upright, my heart pounding as I stared at the wreckage of my independence. Across the street, Linda Thompson stood on her pristine lawn, arms folded, a smug grin curling her lips. She had no clue that her act of spite wasn't just cruel, it was a crime that would unravel her world. Let me take you back to how this nightmare unfolded. My name is Henry Sullivan, a 72-year-old retired literature professor who traded lecture halls for a quieter life 3 years ago. 8 months ago, I moved to Crest View Meadows, a cozy neighborhood in suburban Oregon, to be near my daughter, Emily, and her kids. At first, it seemed like the perfect spot, tree-lined streets, tidy homes, and a sense of community. But I soon learned that Crest View Meadows was under the iron grip of Linda Thompson, the HOA president who ruled with the fervor of a dictator wielding a rulebook. I got a condition that's been eating away at my spine and legs for years, making my walker as essential as oxygen. Without it, I'm stuck barely able to shuffle from my door to the mailbox, let alone tackle stairs or uneven ground. I kept my walker on my small, covered porch where it was sheltered from the rain, but easy to grab when I needed to head out. It was a practical solution, or so I thought, until Linda showed up at my door, clutching a binder stuffed with HOA regulations like it was her holy grail. With a sneer barely hidden behind her polished smile, she declared my walker an eyesore, that VY-OLAT Section 9.2 of the neighborhood's aesthetic code. Apparently, no mobility aids, medical devices, or personal items could be VY-sible from the street. I tried to explain my situation, figuring anyone with a shred of empathy would get it. I was wrong. Linda's eyes narrowed, and she handed me a citation, GIVYing me 48 hours to remove the obstruction. When I called the HOA management company to appeal, they sounded sympathetic but said their hands were tied. Linda was the elected president, and her word was law. I requested a hearing with the board, but Linda controlled the schedule, and my requests were mysteriously delayed month after month. Warning letters started piling up in my mailbox, each one sharper than the last, threatening fines and legal action. Linda was relentless. She'd stalk my property with a camera, snapping photos of my walker from every angle, noting the exact times I used it, even measuring how far it stuck out from the porch railing. It was like she'd made it her life's mission to document my every move. Fines started hitting me hard, due law 75 1 week, due law 150 the next, all for the crime of needing to get around. Then she upped the ante with community enhancement strolls, parading neighbors past my house while pointing at my porch like it was a public disgrace. She'd wave her arms, ranting about how my walker was tanking property values. Most neighbors shuffled along, looking uneasy, but no one dared challenge her. Fear of her wrath kept them silent. The tension simmered for months, but the breaking point came on a crisp Wednesday afternoon in early fall. I was inside, scribbling notes on a novel I'd been reading, old habits from my professor days, when I heard a commotion outside. Through the window, I saw Linda storming up my driveway, her face red with fury, her usual uniform of pressed slacks and a Crest VY-EW Meadows polo shirt. GI-VY-ing her the air of self-appointed sheriff. I hobbled to the door as fast as I could, my cane barely keeping me steady without my walker. Linda was already on my porch, her breath heavy from her march across the street, her eyes blazing with a manic intensity I'd only seen at heated HOA meetings. "This ends now, Henry," she barked, not even bothering with pleasantries. "Your walker's gone." I tried to reason with her, my voice steady but pleading, explaining that I needed it to function, that I had nowhere else to store it. But Linda wasn't listening. In a flash, she grabbed my walker with both hands and yanked it from the railing. The sudden jolt nearly knocked me over. I had to clutch the door frame to stay upright. She dragged the walker down the 3 porch steps, the metal screeching against the concrete with each thud. By the time she hit the driveway, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered, drawn by the noise. What happened next felt like a scene from Fever Dream. Linda hoisted the walker above her head, her face twisted with triumph, and slammed it onto the asphalt with a bone-rattling crash. The sound echoed through the quiet street, sharp and final. But she wasn't done. She lifted it again, smashing it down harder, snapping a support beam in two. Rubber grips and plastic fittings flew in all directions, skittering across the pavement like shrapnel. Mrs. Larson, my neighbor to the left, let out a gasp. Mr. Daniels, who lived 2 houses down, took a hesitant step forward, as if he might intervene, but Linda was a force of nature now. She kicked at the broken pieces, scattering them further, all while shouting about community standards and property values. Her rage was a spectacle, a 2-minute explosion that felt like an eternity as I stood helpless, watching my mobility, freedom being obliterated by a woman unhinged by her own power. When she finally stopped, Linda stood panting amid the wreckage, sweat beading on her forehead, her chest heaving. She looked up at me, still gripping the doorframe, and smirked. "Problem solved, Henry," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "You can thank me later for cleaning up the neighborhood." Then she turned and strutted back to her house, leaving me stranded and the mangled remains of my walker strewn across my driveway like a crime scene. That's when Emily pulled into the driveway for our weekly dinner. She had to swerve to avoid the debris, her confusion turning to horror as she took in the sight. Her father trapped on the porch, the shattered walker at her feet. Emily's a physician's assistant, and she knew instantly how serious this was. She rushed to help me down the steps, her face tight with anger, and whipped out her phone to call 911. "Someone destroyed my father's medical equipment," she told the dispatcher, her voice shaking but firm. "He's disabled, and now he's stuck in his house." The dispatcher's tone sharpened when she heard medical equipment, promising officers would be there in minutes. 2 police cars rolled up less than 10 minutes later. Officers Rivera and Brooks approached with calm professionalism, first checking if I needed medical help, then listening as Emily and I recounted the chaos. I walked them through Linda's rampage, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest, emphasizing that the walker wasn't just a tool, it was my lifeline. The officers exchanged a glance when I mentioned its medical necessity, their expressions hardening. They asked if there were witnesses, and I nodded toward Mrs. Larson and Mr. Daniels, who were still lingering in their yards, watching the scene unfold. That's when Linda made her fatal mistake. She came marching back across the street, clipboard in hand, her confidence unshaken, as if she could talk her way out of this. "I'm Linda Thompson, HOA president," she announced, launching into a spiel about neighborhood aesthetics and her duty to enforce the rules. The officers listened, but their faces grew sterner with every word. Officer Rivera cut her off mid-rant. "Did you intentionally destroy Mr. Sullivan's walker?" he asked, his voice calm but pointed. Linda, us to the trap, puffed out her chest. "Yes, I removed the unsightly obstruction and disposed of it properly," she said, even pulling out her phone to show them photos she'd taken before and after her destruction, like a proud artist displaying her work. Officer Brooks's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am," he said, "this isn't just an HOA issue. Destroying medical equipment someone relies on is a crime, potentially criminal mischief, endangerment, and, given Mr. Sullivan's age and disability, possibly elder abuse." Linda's face drained of color. She stammered, claiming she didn't know the walker was medical equipment, that she was just enforcing standards. Rivera wasn't HOA-ing it. "Ignorance of the law isn't a defense," he said, pointing out that her own photos showed her deliberately smashing the walker, pro-VYing intent. By now, more neighbors had gathered, some recording on their phones as Linda's protests grew frantic. She demanded to speak to a super VY-sor, claimed she was being targeted for doing her volunteer job, even threatened to call her lawyer. The officers didn't flinch. After a quick huddle with their dispatcher, Brooks turned to Linda. "You're under arrest for criminal mischief and endangering a vulnerable adult," he said, pulling out handcuffs. As he read her rights, Linda's bravado crumbled disbelief, then anger, then raw panic flashing across her face. She kept insisting it was a misunderstanding, that she was protecting the neighborhood. But the sight of her being led to the patrol car, hands cuffed, in front of half the community was surreal. This woman, who'd terrorized Crest VY EW Meadows with her petty citations and power trips, was finally facing real consequences. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Linda was charged with destruction of medical property and endangering a vulnerable adult, serious crimes that could mean jail time and hefty fines. Her bail was set at due $7,500, and she had to surrender her passport while awaiting trial. The story hit local news, turning Crest VY EW Meadows into a cautionary tale. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, voting unanimously to oust Linda as president. They issued a public apology to me, wiped all my fines, and rolled out new rules ensuring medical exemptions for mobility aids. Linda's trial was a spectacle, the courtroom packed with neighbors and curious locals. As the gavel fell, Linda's face collapsed, the weight of her actions finally sinking in. Her reign of petty tyranny had cost her everything: her position, her reputation, and now her freedom. For me, it was bittersweet. I got a new walker, courtesy of the restitution, and the neighborhood felt lighter without Linda's shadow. But the memory of that day, watching my independence shattered on my own driveway, still lingers. What do you think? Did Linda deserve her punishment, or was the system too harsh on her? Should HOAs have the power to police medical equipment, or is that crossing a line? And how far would you go to stand up to someone like Linda in your own neighborhood? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button if this story got your blood boiling, and subscribe for more real-life dramas that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.